Good to see you again.
How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well.
Great to see you here again. Thank you for doing this.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I got a lot to say about our next speaker, so I'm just going to go ahead and start talking while you find your seats. Tom Musca first captured the attention of the world as a producer and director of the incredibly famous movie Stand and Deliver. I love Stand and Deliver because Edward James almost stars in that movie, and he's also in Miami Vice. And Miami Vice is probably the reason I had to move to Miami as soon as I was old enough. So it is absolutely awesome. He wrote the screenplay 1 Mile North, stand over here, which is a story about a restaurant near Ground Zero and the recovery workers who frequented it. And he's also associate producer of Praying for Rain, a drought farm drama that opened in 2017. There was so much. Let me put it to you this way. When I knew I was going to have to introduce him, I went to Wikipedia, and I was like, okay, let me just take a little, you know what I mean, a little here, a little there. There is no way that I can adequately introduce him except to say, if you live in Miami and you make films, you need to know Tom Musca. So without further ado, Tom Musca.
Hello. Okay, Brian, but I also wrote Stand and Deliver. I did Tortilla Soup. I did Money for Nothing. There's a bunch of films. It's okay. What am I? I'm a Hollywood hyphenate. What does that mean? I'm a screenwriter by choice, a producer by necessity, and a director by self-defense. I started as one thing, and I evolved to all three. I used to make, like Brian was saying, Hollywood-type films. I did one with James Gandolfini, John Cusack, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Benicio del Toro. It was great for a while. And then I came out here to teach. And I now make a different type of film. I make Miami films. In fact, I'm starting to shoot next Friday. First COVID, post-COVID film. So I'm making a lower budget film, but fortunately the last 3 films I made, we sold them all to HBO. I have one running there now called Chateau Vato, V-A-T-O. It's a comedy starring Paul Rodriguez. If you're interested in my talk, you might want to not read my novel. By the way, Taco Jesus sounds like a comedy to me. He said he didn't write comedy. That's a comedy if I ever heard one. But he gave a very nice talk. I want to piggyback on something he said. He said The Sopranos changed television, and it did. But it's not only content that changes television or film. It's the actual mechanics of making a film. Television changed with the DVR. Before that, they were all single character, single episodes. Characters didn't change, like he was saying. But now, once you had the DVR, you don't have to be present to watch the show. Today, of course, we have binging, streaming, so it's not an issue anymore. But that's what changed television. You could now watch 10 episodes in one day. And so you didn't have to have standalone episodes that had a beginning, middle, and end. You now could follow a storyline, left to right, over time. That's what changed television. And that has to do with the manufacturing of movies. Everything has changed since I went to UCLA Film School. I mean, it's just so different. I did a feature film. I spent $22,000 doing my credits. Can you imagine today? That's a budget of a short film. You know, it's just different. It's always evolving, and that's why these kind of conferences are good, because you, in fact, have to keep up with what's going on. Whether you're just a writer or a producer, a director, an actor, the more you know, the better off you are. Let's my favorite quotes, and this is by a screenwriter who actually died this year. But I love starting with this quote because it really defines who the screenwriter is and what we do and how we think. The scriptwriter has the right and probably the duty to be an out-and-out criminal in his thoughts. He should several times a day kill his father, rape his mother, and sell his sister and his country. He must search for the criminal within himself. He must make an effort to be shameless. But if there is a bastard within him, there is also a purity. He himself is a multiple personality. You are always walking around. It's almost like having a child. I remember when I had my first child, I was following it one day around the block. And, oh, there's a car coming, or there's a tree that looks like it might tilt over because the lightning hit it, and there's a homeless person, and there's this, and there's that, and there's this, and I'm running what? Worst case scenarios in my head, 10 a minute, as most mothers do. You're constantly running worst case scenarios, worst case scenario. So after an hour with a 3-year-old, you come back home, and mom sits down like this. Because she just ran 300 worst case scenarios in her head. None of them are perfect. But that's what you do when you're a screenwriter. You're always pushing towards the limit. Pushing towards the limit. What could happen here? What if? What if? What if? What if? What if? What if? And then you start connecting. So once you train your mind to do that, you'd be surprised how unhappy you will be the rest of your life. That's But you'll infinitely be able to entertain yourself in any situation, I'll say that. All right. James Baldwin, one of my favorite writers, said, "The act of writing is finding out what you don't want to know and what you don't want to find out." Whatever you guys come up with is going to be different than when you think you're doing when you begin it. It is a process. Writing is a process. I have written screenplays in as little, for money for 2.5 months, and I've written an adaptation that took me 1.5 years. You would think the book would take a very short amount of time, and the original screenplay would take less, not necessarily. This is one of my favorite moments. William Faulkner went through a number of marriages, and one time he was doing what this woman was doing, was looking out the window like this, and she said, "William, don't you think you should get to work?" And he turned and said, "I am working." We get paid to daydream. I never feel like I have a beginning, a middle, and end to my day. I really don't. I am constantly thinking, working, my projects. If I don't get a line, I rewrite my script so many times my actors hate me. They literally get angry at me and go, "Oh, here's a new draft, there's a new draft, there's a new draft." I work them. Plus, I've been in enough editing rooms, which is where I really learned how to write, that I know how much rewriting is done in the editing room. And it has nothing to do with creating new work. It's creating pictures that now tell the story and rearranging them and modifying them to make the story work. When you look at an assembly edit of your first cut, it's like watching a person who's, I don't know what the proper politically correct term is, but let's just say someone who has some muscular issues dancing. Your first assembly edit is all over the place because it has no rhythm or tone. And you start working it in the editing room. But in the script, you can only approximate what that is. Let's talk about writing. Everything you see on screen is first written. It begins with the work. As much as I'm a director, as much as I'm a producer, I always call myself a screenwriter first. That's the definition of who I am as a human being. I'm a screenwriter. I'm also a film teacher, but that's something else. Writing is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but it's possible to do that and get through the whole way. Now, when you write a screenplay, sometimes you write right to left and left to right. Once you're through it once. How do I write? One of the things I work with my students and anyone else who asks me is, you've all grown up using prose, right? Prose being sentences to describe things. They are invaluable in the screenwriting process. Young screenwriters make the mistake of writing the script way too early. Because it is one of the most awkward forms when you get into screenwriting, and it really hypnotizes you in a way that you'll never understand. When you start doing exterior, forest, day, blah, 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 it's very hard once you've created these scenes to really play with them once the whole thing lays out. But that's not true with prose. Prose you can play with endlessly, can't you? Those of you who have written, I've written novels, but prose you can play with endlessly. So I really, really suggest you spend more time writing your story and your character out in a synopsis. In fact, that's also how you fix your screenplay. I'll get to that in a second. So you have a concept for a web series or a single movie, whatever it be, and use the power of sentences to talk about, well, it's almost like writing a trailer to the movie. And when I start beginning with a new idea, I feel like the idea is auditioning for a screenplay. I don't think it is a screenplay. I don't grant it that kind of attention yet. It's almost like a first date. I'm going out, I'm feeling it out, we've been on this first date, it's feeling good, let's have another date. I don't start the screenplay, I don't start the movie yet. I'm waiting for the idea to convince me that I should spend 6 months to a year of my life on this. It hasn't done that yet. It's a premise to begin with, right? A log line to begin with, right? It's not a story. What is a story? What is a story? Who knows what a story is? You live with stories all around you. Yet you know how few people can tell a story? And that, believe it or not, wasn't true of previous generations. And let me just say, I went to a lot of Thanksgivings with my uncles who got drunk and talked about World War II. These guys can spin a story. They weren't screenwriters, but they knew how to tell a story. Most people today, for some reason, really are very awkward in how they tell a story. So, a screenwriter has to be three things I like to talk about. An architect. My son is an architect. What is an architect? That means narrative, story, structure. Those are the building. Every film is made of what? What is the essential building block of a movie, please? What is the essential building block of a movie? What? Conflict is an idea within what I'm talking about. Let's go right there. No, not character. Characters up. Here we go. What is a scene? The fundamental building block of a screenplay, is it not? When you watch a movie, you are actually watching a collection of scenes. That's what you're watching. In fact, they've moved around since they were first written. They've been condensed since they were first written. They've been changed since they first. In fact, they've been re-emphasized by the director who used the blueprint of the screenplay to decide what the movie could be. So what's the first obligation of a scene? You can see it up there, correct. I'm going to... Advance the story. Does the scene advance the story? Number one. Number two, does the scene reveal something new about the character, your protagonist? Number three, does it tell us something about the world and what the young lady said? Does it have conflict? Because if a scene doesn't have conflict, you're not going to use it. Don't write scenes without conflict. So if you have these four things, there's a good chance that scene will hold in the editing. And don't kid yourself. When you make a feature film, how long is the assembly edit? Assembly edit, you take the script and you put it together. The editor is not getting creative. He's saying, here's the script, here's the film, here it is, I'm putting it together for you guys to see what you did first time through. How long are they? How long is the feature film assembly edit in Hollywood? How much has to come back down? They are never too short. They are never too short. You got to take out usually 30%, 25%, 20% of your film and throw it away. And you'll start seeing redundancies. You'll know why. But it's one of the things you have to do. So what I'm saying is, use the synopsis to begin with. Okay? Create your your story in terms of a bunch of sentences and plumb the psychological depths of your character. Let it audition what the screenplay could be, not what it is. Writing plot takes time. Writing plot is like going to the dentist chair. It's not that much fun. It's fun to talk about character. It's fun to talk about the moments, the sizzle, the color. It's fun to do all that work. But writing plot, now depending on the genre, isn't that much fun. And no one expects you initially to write a great plot. You can steal plot, by the way. Plot is stolen all the time. Even Mr. Shakespeare did it. But plot isn't fun. Plot is the hard work of writing, and that takes time. So don't expect yourself to figure out your plot in 5 minutes. We have tools. I think the gentleman before me was talking about the 3-act structure. The 3-act structure is like a circus tent. It allows you to initially create a plot outline that you say, okay, it can fit in the tent. My story can fit. I think it can work. And it has 2 turning points at the end of Act 1, the end of Act 2. Now, let's start with a premise or log line. I mentioned that I have a film on HBO, so I might as well promote it because I'm in Hollywood. No, I'm not. I'm in Duffy's. I was in Hollywood for most of my life, but now I'm in Duffy's. So here I go. But I think they have really good burgers. What do I order here, Brian? What do I got? What?
The beer.
Burgers are great.
The what? Burgers are, if this place can't have good burgers, I can't have good. All right. So when I sold this film to HBO, they created a log line. This is what they created. A skilled but down on his luck gardener stumbles upon a glorious estate that hasn't been landscaped in months. Anything on HBO is going to have a nice short. Then on our website, I had this one. When an impoverished Latino family squats in a mansion, murder and mistaken identity get twisted in a rags to riches comedy of errors. That's on our website. And this is from when it premiered at the Miami Film Festival. A skilled gardener and his family move into an abandoned mansion after discovering the death of its wealthy owner. As the family leaves poverty and hardship behind and starts embracing the comforts of the good life, the adventure of squatting nevertheless threatens to tear them apart, especially as they begin to unearth the mysteries surrounding the homeowner's death. Those are 3 log lines. They're all similar. They're all the same. They begin to tell more and more story. Now, what I like to do is I have an idea for a film, right? As you can see, this idea is similar to the film Parasite, which I absolutely adore. I thought it was brilliant, much better than this year's winner. Anyway, Parasite was a brilliant film. And my film, even though I wrote the first draft long before Parasite, I mean, filmmaking people, you know how crazy it is, right? My original producer was arrested 3 days before filming. He was originally called Beverly Hills Barry. He was arrested in Los Angeles, went to jail, killed himself in jail. 4 years later, I said, no, I'm going to make this film in Miami, retitle it, and rewrite it. And now it's on HBO. That's not unusual for the film business. It's full of curveballs. And if you are rigid in anything, you're going to get broken. This is a job for, if you're a great generalist, you have a future in this business. You have to be good at a lot of things to do this well. Those people who can be chemistry majors and physicists, they don't do this that well, generally speaking. So I begin by creating a pitch, which is not different than the synopsis itself. The synopsis is literally well written, I hope, right? Has sentences, it's polished. But the pitch is a verbal version of the synopsis. And what I'm doing again is I'm testing my story. I'll pitch it to other writers. I'll tell you a story. When I graduated from UCLA Film School, like the previous writing teacher was saying, I had one of my best friends was a guy named Michael Miner. And Michael knocked on my door one day because we used to trade screenplays. He said, Tom, you want to read this synopsis I wrote? Sure, Michael. I'll be back tomorrow, we'll have coffee. Great. So I read it, it's 3 pages long. And it's about a futuristic cop, and has a lot of the genre tropes of cops, and sci-fi, and all this. And at that point in time, I was a little probably too much, like he described, more intellectual, more crazy, doing really weird. I was trying to break the pattern, the molds of filmmaking because I was 27 years old. That's what you do. I was trying to reinvent the wheel. He was saying, don't reinvent the wheel. I think when you're 27, try and reinvent the wheel, because when you're my age, you're not going to have the ability to even think about that too often. Once in a while, you kiss it and run. But anyway, so I read this 2.5-page synopsis. And he says, Tom, what do you think? And I said, well, Michael, if you want to do something like that, go ahead, do it. I said, what's the title? He said, RoboCop. Now, RoboCop became $1 billion franchise that young Tom Musca was dismissing as commercial claptrap. That happened to me again. When did this happen? Well, there was a gentleman named Neil Moritz who saw my student film and invited me up to see his father. Now, his father worked for something called UIP, which was more like the drive-in type films. And he had a poster there on Mulholland Drive, and had a car and a bunch of kids. No, not the David Lynch one, but a car and a bunch of kids. And he said, I heard you're a good writer. I want to hire you to write this film. Well, what's the story? I don't have one. Just look at the poster. You see it? Okay. But young Tom Musca had just gotten into the writer. I saw my first film, which was called Little Nikita, and I'd just gotten into the Writers Guild, which identity is a gigantic thing in this business. Who you are, what you think of yourself, how you promote yourself. So I wasn't willing to work under Writers Guild minimum and jeopardize my newly found place in the Writers Guild, because for that, identity was everything to me. That became the Fast and Furious franchise, which probably dwarfed RoboCop by a lot. Neil Moritz is still making those films. That's okay. One of the most important words in screenwriting and film business is what? 4 letters. What is it? No, it's not the one that starts with F. What is the most important word you think in screenwriting? Or in our business? Yeah.
Jump.
Job? That's 3 letters.
Jump.
What?
J-U-M-P. Jump.
Oh, jump. What does that mean?
That means take the chance.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, I like that. Take a chance. Yeah, you're right. Go for it. Take a chance. Get your ass. Don't be afraid to embarrass yourself. I have done some ridiculous things. I waited once an hour and a half in a men's room for an executive to come out of his office so I could confront him. It worked. Anyway, and nothing really untoward happened. Next is the word I'm looking for. N-E-X-T. Next is a really important word. You're going to, when Edwin James Olmos and I took Stan and Liver around, we went to Disney, and the guy at Disney looked at us and said, I like this film. I think I can get my son to see it and he'd like it, but I don't think he could get his friend to see it. And Edwin and I looked at each other and said, okay, thank you. Anyways,